Hello, beloved. Welcome back to the Sinai to Zion study. This is now session 11. We're getting close to the end. In last week's study, we talked about the covenant that was made, and it was sealed with a marriage supper on top of Mount Sinai. Moses and Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the representative 70 elders of Israel. They went halfway up the mountain, and they looked up, and it says they saw the feet of God, and then they ate a meal together. And in so many ways, this becomes the prototype, the foreshadow of the ultimate marriage supper of the Lamb at the end of the age, when the betrothal ceremony that was made at Mount Sinai is consummated with the marriage supper of the Lamb. Now, if the story had just ended there, it would be almost perfect. But unfortunately, you have the episode of what I refer to as the golden calf catastrophe. In all of redemptive history, other than the actual fall itself in the garden, this is arguably the greatest catastrophe, one of the greatest of all catastrophes throughout all of redemptive history. It's a horrible, brutal story. Exodus 32, 1 through 4. We ended last week's session by talking about how Moses went up for 40 days, and he was in the presence of the glory of God. Here's Israel at the base of the mountain. They're looking up. They can see the presence of God on the mountain like a consuming fire. God is in blazing fire right in front of them in the middle of the ceremony, in the middle of the marriage or betrothal ceremony. When the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and they said to him, "Come, make for us gods, idols, if you will, who will go before us. Because this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him." Aaron replied to them, here's Moses' brother Aaron. He just went up the mountain. He saw the feet of God. And he says, "Take off your gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. Gather all of the gold and bring it to me." And all the people took off the gold rings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took them the gold, he fashioned it with an engraving tool, and he made it into an image of a calf. Now, for what it's worth, Scripture actually describes the idol-making process. This was probably, this golden calf was not just this big, solid gold cow. In all likelihood, he made the cow out of wood, and then he overlaid it with gold that had been beaten thin. This is most often how idols were made. Again, the Bible describes it. And we know that's probably what happened, sort of jumping forward, because it says that Moses actually, when he comes down the mountain, he burnt the idol. Now, you can't burn pure gold, but you can if there's just a thin sheet of gold over it, or a thinner sheet of gold, but underneath is wood. Okay, so he makes the idol, verses 4 through 8. Then they said, "Israel, these are your gods." This is unbelievable. They have just seen the God of Israel leading them through the desert in the pillar of cloud. All of the miracles, the ocean was ripped in half, quail and manna, water from the rock. The Lord appears to them in fire on the mountain. And then they say, "These things that we just fashioned, these are your gods." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of it and he made an announcement. There will be a festival. And then they refer to these cows as the Lord. He says, there's going to be a big party tomorrow. Early in the morning, they arose. They offered burnt offerings. They presented fellowship offerings. The people, now this is to be contrasted with what we saw on the mountain. It says they saw God and they ate and drank. Here it says the people sat down to eat and drink and they got up to party. Some translations say they rose up to play. Now the word there, party, play, it has sexual connotations. There's a sexual component underlying this. What it's referring to is pagan revelry, sort of like an orgy, a big party, a celebration. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Go down at once, for your people that you brought up from the land of Egypt have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned away." I mean, they just said, everything the Lord has said we will do. And in the midst of Moses up there on the mountain, I mean, the covenant is not even really over yet. They're already turning away from the Lord and disobeying him. He says, how quickly they have turned away. They have fashioned for themselves an image of a calf. They had bowed down to it. They have sacrificed to it. And they have said, "Israel, these are your gods who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Can you imagine standing in front of consuming fire on a mountain or a hand-fashioned carving of a cow, and they chose to worship the handmade idols of cows? Now, I'm just going to share a bunch of pictures with you and then just a couple more verses. So when you're there at this particular mountain in Saudi Arabia, about 300 yards from Moses' altar, which we looked at in a previous study, there's this big structure of rocks, and all over it are petroglyphs. These are carvings sort of into the rock of cows. Exactly what we'd expect to find if there were remnants of the golden calf catastrophe. So here's the first picture, clearly a picture of a cow. Again, very primitive. What they do is they take rocks and they kind of beat through what's called desert varnish. It's this darkening over the rock. And these all fall, by the way, right within the dating of when the Exodus happened. Okay, so these are not modern petroglyphs. These fall within that sort of Bronze Age era. Here's another picture of a cow. There's actually a whole bunch of them all on this sort of, and there's a whole bunch of them on this rock structure, which I believe was the golden calf altar, and there's a handful of others around the vicinity, right in the area. Now, here's what's interesting. Here's a picture, because when you study the scholars, they make fun of this. They go, no, these have nothing to do with worship or Israel. These are just pictures of cows. You know, some farmers at one time carved them. It's nothing unusual, this type of thing. Here's a picture from Egypt. This is from the tomb of Pharaoh Seti I. And it's a raised sort of a carving of a cow. You can't see it all that great. I've included a drawing of this carving. You can see it much better. And this is, for no better term, this is Egyptian religious iconography. Okay? These are drawings which portray religious worship within Egypt. Now notice there's some very specific images here. You have the cow. Notice the person standing under the cow with his hands raised. Notice the person holding the tail of the cow in the back. Not really a super common thing to walk behind a cow and hold the cow's tail or to stand under a cow. But again, this is communicating Egyptian worship of their false cow gods. Now watch this. Here is a mural, a petroglyph, that's right there by the base of the mountain in Saudi Arabia. See the person standing under the cow with his hands raised? Very specific. The point is this. These are not merely scenes that farmers drew. The people that drew this came from Egypt. These images are portraying worship of cows, which is exactly what the Bible says happened. There was a celebration. There was a festival. Now, I didn't notice this the first time, but when I went back the second time, I noticed this. Notice at the back of this cow, there's a person there holding the tail, exactly like the imagery that we see in Egypt. Okay, again, it's little stick figures. They're sort of easy to miss. Here's another picture, another person standing behind the cow, holding the tail, exactly like what we see there in Egypt. Now, here's a little bit awkward, but I think it's important to point out. This is a mural portraying a whole bunch of cows as well as a bunch of people. Again, I didn't notice this the first time that I went, but when I went back, I went, these are not farmers, because every one of these people in the picture are all very excited, okay? The point is this. The Bible describes, it tells us that there was a sexual, religious, pagan orgy that took place. That's exactly what we see portrayed here in these petroglyphs. And then we have this statement, verses 19 through 20. As Moses approached the camp and he saw the calf and the dancing, the people were dancing. Moses became enraged, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, smashing them at the base of the mountain. So these were the first tablets. Moses goes back up the mountain, and the covenant is remade. We won't get into all of those details, but he took the calf they had made. He burnt it. Okay, he ground it into powder. He scattered the powder over the surface of the water, and he forced the Israelites to drink it. I believe God, the God of the Bible, is a God of object lessons. He likes to burn things into our minds so that we don't forget. Now, 1 minute, they're worshiping the golden calf idol. Like the next day, Moses has burnt it, they drank it, and what happens after you drink something? It ends up as waste on the ground. And the Lord was essentially saying, where are your gods now? Some people say it may have given them diarrhea. What has become of your false gods now. The message of the Lord throughout the history of redemption is he says, I am he. Behold, I am he. I am your God. None of the other gods are worthy of worship. I alone. And he demonstrates this here. He goes, those are not gods. I alone am God. What has become of your gods now? They are human waste on the ground. Behold, I am he. I am he. So here's another interesting mural. What do you see? Again, this is right there by the base of Mount Sinai. You see people dancing. And the three people up top sort of have their hands in the air. You can see, again, they appear to be naked. They appear to be men. The one down below, I could be wrong, but I think this seems to be a female. Her arms are down, perhaps sort of communicating female anatomy. And they clearly appear to be dancing, exactly what the Bible describes. And then after the golden calf catastrophe, Exodus 32, verses 25 through 28, Moses saw the people were out of control, for Aaron had let them get out of control, making them a laughingstock to their enemies. Moses stood at the camp's entrance and he said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. Whoever is for the Lord, come to me. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Every man fasten his sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp from entrance to entrance. Each of you kill, listen to this, kill his brother, kill his friend, kill his neighbor. The Levites did as Moses commanded, and about 3,000 men fell dead that day among the people. Here's another petroglyph. This was only discovered several months ago. Again, there's the dancing people, almost in the exact same form as the other mural where they're dancing. And both of them have something going through them. Now, I looked at that, and when I first saw it, I said, are these guitars? Like, what am I looking at here? Their hands are not on the guitars. I don't even know if they had guitars back then. I actually think this is portraying the swords piercing through the people. Now, again, one of them appears to be a man, a very sort of exaggerated portrayal of a male's anatomy. The other one seems to be a female. It seems to be portraying that the people that engaged in the idolatry that were partying, they were pierced through. And then finally, because this is such an intense episode in the story, in Deuteronomy 33, just before Moses dies, he blesses each one of the tribes of Israel with sort of a prophetic blessing. And he says this, of Levi. Now again, the Levites were the ones that killed their friends, their neighbors. He says, let your Thummim and your Ummim belong to your godly men, whom you proved. You proved yourselves at Massah, that's the place of contention, with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah, who said, look at this, who said of his father, not just his friends, not just his brothers, not just his neighbors, who said of his father and his mother, I don't consider them. And he did not acknowledge his brothers. He did not regard his own children, his own sons, for they observed your word and they kept your covenant. I'm going to end it right there. The point is this. We read these stories, but there were very real people involved here. The Levites actually obeyed the Lord. They excised the cancer, the idolatrous cancer. They actually killed their own children, their parents, their friends, their neighbors, and their family. And the Lord, it's like he acknowledges the pain that they would have carried for their obedience to the Lord. So very, very intense. I'm going to end it right here. We've got one session left. Thanks so much for sticking it out. God bless you all. Maranatha.